meeting. Thank you. On this happy June 23rd, 2021. So let's go ahead and open it up, and Eloise, we'll turn it over to you for a quorum check and roll call.
District 1, Supervisor Alejo.
Linda Gonzalez, alternate.
District 2, Supervisor Phillips. District 3, Supervisor Lopez.
Priscilla Barba, alternate.
District 4, Supervisor Askew.
Yuri Anderson, alternate.
District 5, Supervisor Adams. City of Carmel by the Sea.
Present and in person.
City of Delray Oaks. The City of Gonzales. The City of Gonzales. City of Greenfield.
Here.
City of King City.
Present, and Mayor Rios was waving his hand. I don't know if you saw that.
Okay, I didn't see that, but I did see him come into the meeting. Thank
Yep.
you.
We see him there, and he's raising his hand. He's working on the sound.
Thank you. City of Marina.
Good morning, here.
City of Monterey.
Present.
City of Pacific Grove.
Here.
City of Salinas.
Here.
City of Sand City.
Here.
City of Seaside.
Here.
City of Soledad. Ambag.
Here.
Caltrans District 5.
Present.
Monterey Bay Air Resources District. Monterey Regional Airport District.
Here.
Monterey Salinas Transit.
Lisa Reinheimer for Carl Sidoric today.
City of Watsonville. CSUMB. Chair, we do have a quorum.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Eloise. Next item, we want to announce to the public, any member of the public that is invited to address the board on any item not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of this board under this term or this item. Each member of the public is allowed 3 minutes to address concerns, and comments in items on this agenda may be given when that agenda item is discussed. Anyone wishing to address the board for public comments or on an item on the agenda are encouraged to submit comments prior to the meeting to Maria at tamcmonterey.org by 5 p.m. the Monday before the meeting. So at this time, we'll invite any members of the public that may have joined us that may wish to make a comment on any item not on the agenda. Eloise, I'll rely on you to ask if you see anyone who has joined us from the public.
Okay, that's a negative. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
This is Josh Dren. I'd like to chime in. I have audio problems at roll call, but this is Josh Dren here on behalf of Supervisor Phillips.
Thank you. I got that. Thank you.
Okay, Josh. Yeah, we see your photo, but we don't see you live yet.
Mhm.
And
Morning.
Eloise, looks like Supervisor Adams is also here.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kathleen Azevedo, and I was invited to this meeting given that I live on Highway 101.
Okay, good morning, Kathleen, and welcome. We are going to have an item of an interest on item 5 on the US 101 between Chular interchange, but if you have any other comments other than that, now would be the time.
Nope. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for joining us. Hearing no members from the public other than Kathleen, we'll move to the consent agenda. Any members of the public or members of this board wishing to pull an item or make a comment on any item from the consent agenda? Okay, once again, any members of the board wishing to pull or make a comment on consent items? Okay, hearing none, we'll entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
So moved, Craig.
Second, Potter.
Thank you. Eloise, if we could do the roll call vote on the agenda item.
Okay. District 1, alternate Gonzalez.
Yes.
District 2, alternate Stratton. District 2, alternate Stratton.
Aye.
District 3, alternate Barba.
Aye.
District 4, alternate Anderson.
Yes.
District 5, Supervisor Adams.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Carmel by the Sea.
Aye.
City of Delray Oaks. City of Gonzales. City of Greenfield.
Aye.
City of King City.
Aye.
City of Marina.
Yes.
City of Monterey.
Aye.
City of Pacific Grove.
Aye.
City of Salinas.
Aye.
City of Sand City.
Aye.
City of Seaside.
Aye.
City of Soledad. Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item is agenda item number 5, or I'm sorry, 4, receive update on federal legislative activities. Christina.
Yes, good morning, Chair and board members. I'm Christina Watson, Principal Transportation Planner with TAMC. And today I am happy to introduce to you Paul Schlesinger and Perrin Badini from Alcalde and Fay, the firm that you hired back in May last month to help us with federal legislative activities. Alcalde and Fay has about 50 years or so of advocacy work in the Capitol, working on federal issues. Paul and Perrin specifically focus on transportation and infrastructure issues, and they have quite a few other California clients, so they're familiar with TAMC's issues. Paul specifically previously worked for TAMC from 2002 to 2014, helping to bring in millions of dollars in highway, rail, and trail earmarks over that time, prior to the elimination of earmarks in 2010, and helped us also with working with our federal agencies on our various projects. Earlier this year, that you directed us to go out with a request for qualifications to hire a firm now that we have heard that federal earmarks are making a comeback. And Alcalde and Fay was selected from the 4 firms who responded to that RFQ as having the best plan for accomplishing TAMC's legislative program. The contract was approved at I said this already, at the May board meeting. And we on TAMC staff are really happy to be working with Paul again, and excited to start working with Perrin as well. They're going to be doing the presentation this morning on federal legislative activities. There's a lot going on right now, and I will chime in as needed. This is only an information item. There's no action on this today. Paul, take it away.
Thanks, Christina. I guess I should just say at the outset that our firm has been around for just about 50 years. I have, despite the gray hair, I have not been there for all of those 50 years. Pushing 30, but not the 50. And we're just thrilled to be back working with you all and with Debbie and Christina and Todd. You all have a terrific team there, and we're just hoping that we can add something to that. You had us come on at a very busy time, of course. The federal transportation programs needed to be reauthorized last year and weren't. So toward the end of the year, Congress passed a simple 1-year extension of the existing programs. They would get enacted this year. And in both the House and the Senate, there's been a lot of activity in the last month that's starting to move the bills forward to do that. The Senate actually moved first, whereas in the House, you have one committee that does highways and public transit and railroads and highway safety. In the Senate, you have 3 different committees, which really complicates things. So a lot of people think, not TAMC, I'm sure, but a lot of people view the transportation bill as a highway reauthorization bill. And in the Senate, the committee that does that did report out, moving first, the big highway title to extend the programs, dramatic increases in funding. To just give you a little feel, the current funding, the current authorization in the last bill, just for the entire highway program, is about 47 billion a year. The Senate bill kicked that up to about 59 billion. So in the first year, so that's a pretty dramatic increase. The House Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure, which I served on the staff of for about 10 years, reported, and again, so they do everything. They do highways, they do transit, they do railroads, they do highway safety. They reported their bill out about a week ago. Again, massive increases in highway and transit. Unlike in the Senate Public Works Committee that reported the highway bill unanimously, so everybody, Democrats and Republicans, on board with it. In the House bill, it was pretty much a long party line vote. Part of the issue had to do with funding levels, especially on the transit side. Also, though, there were really 2 hallmarks, I would say, of the House bill, which the first being the creation of programs for just about everything except single passenger automobiles. I mean, just a real emphasis on moving away from new highway construction. And the other hallmark of the highway bill is a huge return to discretionary programs. In the last couple of there used to be lots of discretionary programs up until 10 or 12 years ago. And then interestingly, when Senator Boxer chaired the Senate committee, they pretty much did away with most of them, leaving a couple of very big ones. But for the most part, the transportation program, in addition to doing away with earmarks 10 or 12 years ago, reverted to one that was almost funds apportioned almost entirely by formula. So the House has reported its highway bill about a week ago. It's expected to come up on the House floor before the 4th of July recess, and will presumably pass. Of course, it's the first big bill that restored earmarks, and indeed, you all have been advocating for 2 earmarks this year with the assistance of Congressman Panetta. The request for Highway 101 safety improvements was included at $2 million. We had a second request that was not in there for the Highway 68 improvements for 20 million, or kind of whatever we can get, and that wasn't included. And members were restricted to the amount of money that they could be expected to get through the reauthorization. I think Panetta just felt 2 million was a decent chunk of what he was likely to wind up with. Like I said, the overarching hallmarks of the bill, in my view, are funding for sort of everything except for new highway construction. Not that there isn't any of that in there, but it's clearly not the emphasis, and discretionary programs. Some of the other things that I think you all might be interested in: there's a new discretionary competitive program at I believe $60 million a year to start for wildlife crossings. A real emphasis on resiliency, which I think communities throughout California should probably be interested in, given some of the problems that we have. I see a very cute addition to a picture. Oh, there she goes. Resiliency funding in both the highway and in the House bill and the Senate bill. There are both formula and discretionary components to it. Pre-disaster mitigation, helping to prepare communities for flooding and wildfires. There is a rural bridge program that was set up in the both bills actually. And as I said, the return to earmarks. Interestingly, on the Senate side, they are not doing earmarks at this point. In talking to Senator Padilla's office, and Senator Padilla serves on the committee in the Senate that writes the highway bill. They're not sure if they're going to have an opportunity to leave an imprint on earmarks. So both bills, dramatic increases in funding, as President Biden was advocating for in highways. An obstacle in the Senate side, like I said, the Senate has 3 different committees putting together transportation bills. The one's doing highways and the one doing Amtrak and intercity rail and highway safety. Very bipartisan. Unanimously on the highway committee. I think they lost 2 Republican votes in the other committee. Transit's a different story. The Senate Banking Committee, funding levels are just very contentious. Obviously, the administration and the Democratic leadership of the committee are looking for, very hefty increases in funding, and the Republican leadership of the committee, which is led by Senator Toomey of Pennsylvania, are against such broad increases, and it remains to be seen, how that's all going to be resolved. I would say for a moment, before asking Perrin to jump in to talk about the broad infrastructure bill and how this is all interwoven with that on a separate track, the appropriations committees that are just looking at next year's funding levels are starting their work actually yesterday and today. There's 12 different appropriations subcommittees. The one that we're interested in is the Transportation HUD Appropriations Subcommittee. And they'll be marking up their bill in the next week or so for FY22. There will be additional earmarks in that legislation as well. And again, I think a lot of people back here are expecting a kind of a wild and woolly budget year with regard to the appropriations bills, and people are already guessing that there's probably there may well wind up with a continuing resolution to run the government on the current year's funding levels. And there's even some guessing that we could be heading to another government shutdown later in the year. With that, I would ask Perrin Bedini to jump in. Perrin's been with our firm for 10 or 12 years, makes him a youngster, a newbie. He's been working with me for 7 or 8 years on pretty much most of my clients and what we're doing on infrastructure issues. And again, Perrin's going to talk for a minute about infrastructure, and then we can answer any questions that you have.
Sure. So essentially what we have right now is kind of a dual track process. Paul kind of outlined the reauthorization process, and then separately but intertwined, we've got this broader debate and negotiation over an infrastructure bill. And that ranges in terms of what they want included. The president unveiled his plan, the American Jobs Plan, at the end of March, and that included about 2.2 trillion over 10 years, of which 1.7 trillion was for infrastructure. And the negotiations on that between the White House and the Republican ranking member on Senate EPW, Senator Capito, just in the last few weeks broke down. The Republicans in the Senate were seeking more in the lines of 500 to 600 billion, whereas obviously the White House was looking for a little bit more. There have been subsequent negotiations between a group of bipartisan senators, and they seem to be coalescing around a plan that would provide roughly $1 trillion over, I believe, 8 years. A lot of that does include a reauthorization bill and factors that in, but there are several components that reflect the bipartisan agreement of additional funding for certain areas. And those consistently in any negotiations, there's been agreement on wanting to provide more money for broadband, wastewater and drinking water, energy grid, and some resiliency spending. And the joke here is they just need to decide on how much and how to pay for it. And they have yet to come up with that. So there's also a caucus in the House, the Problem Solvers Caucus, the bipartisan group, and they've been growing in terms of their relevance. They were pretty big in the COVID relief packages debate. And they're a little bit thin on specifics, but again, it kind of coalesces around a pretty significant reauthorization bill, as well as broadband funding and wastewater, drinking water. So the issue now is, and we're going to know a lot more, I imagine, in the next 2 weeks. To Paul's point, House is going to move a reauthorization bill next week, and then the White House has kind of signaled that they're running a little thin on patience in the negotiations on an infrastructure package. So separately, there's also a movement by the chairs of the budget committees. In the House, it's Congressman Yarmouth, in the Senate, it's Bernie Sanders, and they're discussing moving what would amount to be a $6-ish trillion package over, I believe, a decade. And that would incorporate both a highway reauthorization bill, an infrastructure package that covers all of the things that were included in the president's proposal, as well as a broader proposal put out by the president, the American Families Plan, many components of that, including home health care, workforce development, clean energy, as well as public schools, community college, free tuition, those kind of things. And they're gonna, in theory, move that via a reconciliation process. And that is how they moved going back. That's how they moved some of the COVID relief. It's how the Republicans moved the tax reform in 2017. And it essentially allows you to move legislation through the Senate without needing to get 60 votes. So they just need all Democrats on board. But of course, it's not clear if they can even get that. So that process seems a little murky at this point. So I think we'll know more in the next 2 weeks in terms of outlook. And then in all likelihood, they would move any kind of reconciliation instructions, bit of a complicated process, before the August recess to tee up a debate in the fall about if they're actually going to go forward with this. That could all be circumvented if they reach a bipartisan agreement on an infrastructure package. But to be honest, the issue there is that what seems to be developing in the Senate may lack support from the more progressive wing in both the House and Senate Democrats. So that's where we are right now. Obviously there's a lot that is left to be figured out, and we're on top of it, but it is a fluid situation up here that changes on an almost daily basis. So that, I will kick it back to Paul to provide some clarity.
Well, I guess I would just say, close and answer any questions you have that, so that the big issues are, can they get an infrastructure bill? If they don't get an infrastructure bill, will the transportation reauthorization bill move on its own? Kind of seems unlikely because that really pulls the rug out from any other kind of infrastructure vehicle. And how do you get everybody to agree on an infrastructure bill? Anything that you can start to pull Republicans in on, as Perrin said, you lose the left wing of the Democrats. As he was just speaking, I was reminded of the old Will Rogers line that he doesn't belong to any organized political party because he's a Democrat. And I think we're sort of seeing some of that this year, where, the extremes between the progressives and the, things that can get Joe Manchin and, and some of the other more moderate Democrats on, it's tough to even keep the Democrats united, let alone something that's going to get 60 votes to get the Republicans on board. That's the way it is. Happy, I know that it's a lot and it is fluid, as Perrin said, but so everything we said, we might deny ever having said next week, but we can try to answer any questions that you have this week.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul and Perrin, for your comments. And just a lead-in comment before we turn to our first hand raised, Mayor Delgado, I just wanted to say, politics aside, I think collectively we're after the money and we want some resolutions that give us the money. And hopefully none of us really want to get involved in all of the gyrations and the politics and picking sides. TAMC's board is very strong in accomplishing projects. It's about us delivering projects to make our transportation community safer. So we have one of the ones that we'll talk about just next in the agenda item, but we're about trying to get some money out of Washington to accomplish that for the County of Monterey. Bruce, let's go to you first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Perrin and Paul. No matter how all this works out, whether it's earmarks or some other mechanism that gets the money out of Washington, does it all come to the state first and then go through the state to TAMC and to county and to MST and to cities? Or does it go from the feds to these entities I just mentioned?
Well, there's not even a simple answer on that with regard to earmarks, because frankly, the way the highway program works, what we've always said is that it's a federally assisted but state administered program. Now, over the last 10 years, it's increasingly getting away from that, with more and more money going to MPOs to make funding determinations on. Even the earmarks technically get run through the state, but it's purely as an administrative function. So, I mean, on the one hand, I'm sort of giving you the technical answer, but that's not the real life answer, because the 2 million, let's just say we end up getting the 2 million that the staff and the board has worked on for the 101 safety improvements. While it gets run through the state, they can't do anything with it. I mean, there's no question, but that it ends up being spent on the project that we want it to be spent on.
And Paul, if I could add a little bit, the formula monies that Paul referred to, some of those monies come to TAMC. We've called it the RSTP funding. It's now called Service Transportation, STBG funding. So some of the formula monies come to TAMC, but a lot of them go through Caltrans and go to the projects that end up into the state program, the STIP. But when Paul mentioned an increase in discretionary programs, those are the ones that we have to write grant applications and get funding from. in general, those would flow directly to whoever got the money, just like the earmarks, administered by the state, but decided, directed by TAMC. That can get a little bit cumbersome if most of the money is through discretionary programs, because we're a small entity and it's hard to get federal discretionary grants in this region. We just haven't done well on that. There's political reasons for that, and then there's logistical reasons for that too. So yeah, it's a little bit of both.
Thank you.
Any other board members that may have some questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands yet, but let's turn this open to the public for any comments. Any members of the public that may be here today wishing to ask a question or make a comment. Now is the time. If you have access to Zoom, please raise your hand. We'll acknowledge you, members of the public. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands come up from any members of the public. Any questions on this item? Okay. Christina, we'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, that concludes our report today. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Next item up is agenda item 5, US 101 South with Salinas project update. I think we're all very excited to hear this one. So Deborah, who has this presentation?
I'm going to turn it over to Doug Bilsey. It's his, I believe, his inaugural presentation to the board. And so, Doug, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. This morning, we're going to talk about US 101, which is the patient system. So we have a project that we'd like to share with you today. Here we go. Oh.
Doug, we see
difficulties here. Hold on, I'm gonna, there we go. Can we see that?
We got it.
Okay, so agenda for today, we're just gonna give you an overview of what's been going on with the US 101 safety project between Salinas and Chular. And we've done some public outreach, and we've identified some challenges and opportunities, and we like to review some ideas with you and look at next steps. So this section of 101 is a key freight corridor, and it serves farm to market trips. And these are primarily truck trips that come from Spreckles area, and they try to get access to the food processing and farms all along 101 in this section. The goal of this is to make the freeway, or make an expressway into a freeway, and I'll explain that next. So this is traveling southbound. This is about Hartnell Road, and you'll see a freeway would not allow left turns like this truck is about to do here. So this obviously is something we'd like to eliminate, because the left turns against high speeds, if a collision happens, it's going to be a serious accident and likely to be a fatality. Some other things along the corridor we're going to point out a little bit is that there's a frontage road. You can kind of see a dirt path on the west side. And then on the east side, there's some paved road, and then there's some dirt road. And that would play in part of the long-term solution. And we're going to kind of identify the short-term and the long-term solution going forward. The plan right now, as it is approved by Caltrans, would be a bypass of some type. And we just know there's no public support for something that would bring a freeway section in through the farmland. So we kind of acknowledge that, and it's been brought to our attention that there's no public support for that. So here's a section. This is going northbound, and this is going northbound at Spence Road, and you can kind of see all the processing on the east side. This is looking northbound, and then the pallet distribution center over here on the west side. And this is a really key intersection here where you have trucks that come in, semi trucks, that will come in and cross the northbound section and then stop here at the median and then cross again on the southbound. And then probably one of the most important aspects of this is the rail. And then you have to cross the rail here, which is a lot of exposure for a truck to move across here back and forth. The rail line goes all the way along 101, and every crossing there is gated, but well, not everyone, but we like to keep it to gated and eliminate them if possible. So there's a lot of challenges to this. We were presented from the Traffic Safety Alliance, which is a group of stakeholders in this area. And they brought to our attention that, you know, the current plans that are approved just aren't supported by the local community, and they really wanted to get some action early. So we set out to look at that. Specifically, what we heard from these meetings with the Alliance is that safety is a primary concern. We want to minimize the impacts of farm and business properties, and don't let a long-term solution hold up a short-term improvement. So that's what we heard. And what our staff response and our team is working towards is to focus on safety improvements, to upgrade the existing infrastructure, not look at these bypasses and new interchanges that take a lot of farm and businesses' land, and identify project components that can be implemented early. And to do this, we're going to have to update what's called the Project Study Report, or PSR, and that's that approved plan. So when we look at a project of this scope, there's different aspects to it. So we do a needs assessment, and it works all the way along to a design, and then you know, building the project. Right now, we're in this area where we want public input and feedback. Specifically, we're working on a PSR, which does a needs assessment, develops concepts, and documents the scope and cost. And that's what we're going to be sharing with you this morning. And we're going to be asking you to authorize us to start this public input process and get feedback. So the project need, I think it's pretty obvious, but we actually went out and we wanted some data to support that. So this is actually a drone hovering over the intersection. It was done for the AM and PM peak hours for several days. And software analysis would track the car. So you can actually see this blue line is actually a tracking of the car path. And then this light blue line is one that identified a close call. So you have one on the left and one on the right. And I think anyone that's driven this section of 101 has come close or experienced something like this or seen something near miss. These are the actual collisions, and you can kind of see that a high density of the collisions. There's one hotspot here by Spence. Another one is over here by the Abbott Street interchange, where the entrance and exit to the 101 is in the median, which is unique, and it's not typical. And we'll go through that also. And then down here in Chular and Main Street is another spot. So where's all this truck traffic coming from? Well, mostly it's Freckles, and it's mostly trying to make these left turns, or at least that's the major problem that we're trying to focus on in the early stages. The other part, the Spence right here, is a crossover that we looked at. And there's very light traffic from Chular going in, but it's still important, but there are left turns here. But we're gonna focus on the southbound left turns and the truck traffic. Now, where do they come from? In general, the circles just kind of give you an idea of where they're coming from, the size of the circles, and where they're going to, the length of these arrows. So you can kind of see mostly it's right here at Spence and Potter is where most of this traffic that comes in peels off. And then you get down here to Chular and it's very light. If we were to block the left turns or prohibit the left turns from making it, what would happen? Well, right here, we're going to go see this a little bit later, but the Abbott Street interchange doesn't allow an exit. So what would happen is you'd have a diversion back here at Airport Road, and the trips would all have to go over here, and they would go over to Abbott Street and or Alisal Road and then Old Stage Road and eventually get to their destination. Now, this is doable. And it's not a long-term solution, but it does set up us for success. Now, when we look at that, though, we also needed to work with Caltrans, the city of Salinas and the county to identify potential impacts. So these are just spots that we'll be looking at in the near future for this interim solution. What really brings us to a long-term solution is the interchange at Abbott Street. So when we look at that, actually I go back, what we really want to do is access these frontage roads. And right now they're in private land. Some of it's paved, some of it's unpaved, some of it's a little bit of private roads. But when we can access that, this is how the access would go. And you would have direct access from the frontage roads to the uses along 101. The problem is we do not have access to Abbott interchange. So what we really need for a long-term solution is a full access interchange. Here's a picture of the Abbott Street interchange, and you'll see that Abbott Street comes down parallel to 101. It goes under a tunnel of the rail tracks. It goes under 101 southbound, and then it comes in here where traffic can enter 101. And this is not desirable because the slow-moving trucks are accelerating and they merge into the fast lane. And then in the northbound, you'll see that traffic, I think, is somewhat confused going to an exit and going left, exiting left on the freeway to go underneath. You'll also notice that there is no, Abbott does not continue past this point. So you would have to go out in the ag land to connect over here to what's the frontage road. And all along, you're going to see that this rail line is a major constraint along with these power lines. There's power lines, there's rail, and there's water wells that we're all being cognizant of. But if we can get past that, what we would look at is, this is a picture of, we'll travel southbound on 101 and kind of show you what this long-term solution looks like. This is the interchange at Abbott. And we would see that it'd be a full interchange. So you could exit southbound, you could make a left, you could go over the freeway and then connect to Hartnell Road. From Hartnell Road, you can come down, and one way or the other, we haven't figured if this is public or private or there's partnerships, but we need to work together for the community to get the truck traffic access to the farmland. On the other direction, we would take Abbott Street and look at a way to connect to the frontage road on the west side of 101. So moving on, it's pretty much like we saw in the picture, a pretty straight shot to use these frontage roads on either side of 101. And eventually that would mean that we wouldn't have to cross the railroad tracks either. So this continues all the way to Chular. So this is a really good long-term solution. Now, this is just a conceptual idea of one alternative of many, but I just wanted to share this with you because I wanted to show you all the good work that we've been doing. Our team has come up with some conceptual designs, but you can see the scope that would be needed to implement a full exchange at Abbott Street. So it's something we don't want this to hold up getting a solution that we could implement much faster. So this is the idea. The short term is somehow we can prohibit the left turns from happening, and we can make this short-term diversion here. And then we look at the interchange at Abbott Street, and then that gets us to a longer-term solution, which is the access to either side. And what's next? You know, how do we get there? Well, we want to conduct public outreach, and that's why we're asking you to authorize public outreach. And what we're going to do with that public outreach is we want to get them the public to tell them what I just shared with you in a little bit more detail and try to build concurrence on this concept. And then once we get a good feel that we're on the right track from this, we're going to be completing the project study report. And then we start the environmental phase, and that's where we actually pick a preferred alternative and we look at specific phasing. So again, to deliver a project, we really need to get the PSR done, which is what we're doing right now, and an environmental review, which picks the preferred alternative. Then we look at the design, and that's a point where we can start looking for funds. That's kind of when you start getting shovel ready and you have a better a chance of getting funding. And then, of course, where everybody wants to do, we want to get this project going. And in this phased approach, we're not going to let the great get in the way of the good. So the public input is what we're asking for the board to authorize us to start with. And with that, I can answer any questions or we can discuss some more.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. Keep your map handy. We may have to call on that as we get some board questions. But let me go ahead and ask the board right now. And I'd like to divide this in a couple of phases. I think we have a lot of guests today at this meeting. Board questions of the presentation and process. And then we'll go to the public for questions and comments, and then come back to the board because I imagine we'll have quite a few comments from the board. First up, I see, let's see. It looks like first up with questions, I can't tell, but.
Chair, it looks like Bruce Delgado has his hand raised.
Okay, I'm just seeing, I'm trying to navigate the board here. I'm seeing a lot. So Bruce, let's go to you first.
A quick question. Thank you for all the analysis that's gone into this. The question is, if you do the short term, close off the left-hand turn lanes, we'll find out later, but the question is are the drivers, are the trucks, are the ag businesses going to be happy with the slowdown of going around the detour? It looks kind of like, looks a little bit cattywampus. So what do you think the community desire is between having left turn convenience and danger versus no left-hand turn convenience and a longer run around to get south and north?
I couldn't speak for the whole group, and maybe Kathleen Azevedo might be able to talk about when she goes in there, but I think there's strong support for safety. I think that's our highest priority in transportation. And yes, it's going to be an inconvenience. We feel though that if it's done right, it's going to be minimal impact. And with safety as a primary concern, and these are serious collisions that we're talking about. These aren't just fender benders when you get a left turn conflicting with 70, 80 mile per hour vehicles. So I think the intent is to acknowledge and minimize the impact on the drivers and the community around them.
Thank you.
Great. Priscilla.
Hi, Priscilla. I just want to thank everyone for all the work they put into this. And I did have a question on the short-term diversion. So we're thinking if it all goes as planned, we would divert traffic to Alisal and Old Stage Road. I drive the roads all the time. So with the current road conditions, and our county facility does a great job at trying to maintain them at the long miles that we have in our district. Will the current roads hold the weight of the trucks and all that traffic? Will there be a study completed to data to see how this would impact our current roads already?
Yeah, that's basically what these little triangles with the exclamation points are, is that's the point of the study where we're at right now. So that's a very good question. And we don't want to implement the phase on US 101 without having everything in place on the diversion. So the pavement structural integrity is important. We have to look at that, especially at the turns, because a lot of these trucks are already making it, and it has caused some problems. So I think it's not only the pavement, but actually can turns be made in and out. So we'll be looking at that as capital improvement projects. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Also, because I know that some of the roads tend to get very narrow, so I was concerned whether the trucks would have enough room also for the turns. But yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary Adams, next up.
Thank you. Can you just give me an idea of how long this is going to take? Both from the very beginning, going into the public and then environmental review, but most importantly, how long it would be that the trucks and the traffic would have to be diverted before the project is completed?
That's a great question. And I hate to give dates at this time, because what we really have to do is, this is a conceptual idea. And the next step is to go through alternatives. So we don't want to pick an alternative right now, that would be biasing it. So this is a concept that we think could be put in once the environmental document's done and we select a preferred alternative. And if the preferred alternative is something that we look at here, and we're looking at a couple of years to get the environmental documents approved and the EIR and all that. And then once we did that, we'd have to look at what the short-term solution is and what kind of capital improvements are needed on the road. So as we just mentioned, we don't want to start, it's pretty simple to put up no left turn signs. It's this diversion along this blue route that we really need to look at. And we need to identify mitigation measures. So those could take, I would say, a year or two at a minimum to go. So we're talking a year or two for environmental documentation and design, a year or two to get those mitigations going. But I will commit to bringing this information back to the board near the end of the summer. And then we will have a better understanding. That PSR should be buttoned up in about September. Then we're going to have an idea of alternatives. We'll have a better idea of scheduling. So I'd rather not go out on a limb and give you precise dates, but I will commit to a update in a few months.
Thank you so much. Very helpful and great job.
I'll send that to the team. It's been a great team working on this.
Good.
Great. Next up, Josh Stratton.
Yeah, Priscilla asked the same question that I had, and I left my hand up just to reiterate. I had the same exact concern she did. I mean, that blue line over there, I don't even want to drive my little SUV over there next to a semi driving along. And if you divert all these semi trucks and everything, the road is simply not wide enough. I mean, it's aside from the structural integrity of the concrete, there are ditches on the side, it's narrow, and you start putting that volume of semi trucks, I just can't believe that that's going to be a viable possibility, but I know you're doing the due diligence. Even if it was cut off in half and done by what's that Spence Road in the middle, where the road gets a little bit wider, seems like maybe you don't divert quite as far south where the roads are extra narrow. I mean, anyway, I just wanted to reiterate the same concerns that Priscilla had. You got your work cut out for you trying to find a diversion route. Thank you.
Well, that's a good point. And thank you for bringing that up. And I didn't want to go too in depth, but I think we're going to be looking at opportunities for the frontage road. So to your point, it's a really good point. We don't need to go all the way down to Chular right off the bat. So that's kind of what I kind of envision is maybe we go to Hartnell Road and then they break into Hartnell Road and then we can use a frontage road to get over to Spence, because that's really the main key destination for a lot of these truck trips. But it is going to be a phased approach. And for those of you who don't know, I was here 20 years ago. So when I came back, you're going to see me on, I think, all these projects that if it were easy, it would be done already. So those, I think, are a lot of the projects I've been assigned to. And this is a perfect example of if it was easy, we would have done it. But we don't want a perfect solution to get in the way of a good solution, because we can't wait for that interchange is going to be, I would say, years before we get the design and approval and everything set on that. So whether we break this up into smaller projects, so that hasn't been decided either. And the PSR might say, let's break some of these off to county projects, some of them TAMC, some of them Caltrans, and see how we can get something in there as fast as possible. That's our goal.
Can I add one more thing? If one of the main origins of the trucks are from Spreckles, has it been explored to go down Reservation rather than go across 101 to the other side? Can you go down Reservation to the west side? That's a bigger road.
It is. We kind of step back for anything that's available now is probably being used to its best use. And a lot of the trucks are using frontage roads. They're not public roads. But the Traffic Safety Alliance has come with us with strong support to say, we've done all we can and we need your help. And I believe it's all pointing towards the blue line here. Although it's not eloquent and it's going to take a little hardship, it's about safety and the reservation road, again, you have to cross railroad tracks, and that's not desirable. So the one thing that's going to remain on this interim is going to be right-ins and right-outs on the side streets onto 101. And so this blue line just takes care of, we think, just the left turns, which is our primary concern right off the bat. But it's going to take a long staged approach to hit each and every one of those things before we have an actual freeway from Salinas to Chular.
Thank you.
Yeah, Doug, and I want to point out on the staff work on page 2, one of the 5 bullet points of identified issues. You've outlined the proposed improvements should directly serve diverted truck traffic and should not induce traffic use on the frontage roads, intending to avoid congestion. So I think right up front, you've identified that you're recognizing that it does no one any good if we divert all the traffic and we create congestion. So that's been identified in the preliminary comments from your stakeholders.
Yes, and that's what we want to make sure that we don't create a problem on the Salinas, specifically on Salinas. Chular, we have some ideas there on Main Street, but this is really important that we take a look at diverted traffic and the path that it'll take.
Great. Todd.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to add a little bit to Doug's comments. The current businesses, quite a few of them are already directing their truck traffic to use Airport Boulevard and Chular as alternative routes to that left turn. So they're asking them to drive the length to those interchanges to make a U-turn and come back as a safety measure versus the existing left turns. And Doug gave you a really nice overview of the whole issue. But by the time this comes back to the board for some decisions in September, we're going to have this broken down into smaller components after we've gotten a lot of feedback from the community in this area. And there might be some solutions that are parts of the frontage roads get built earlier to help reduce the traffic out on Alisal and Old Stage Road. We'll be able to break this down in different ways and really talk about the pros and cons of those. So when we bring it back to the board, hopefully we'll have a more detailed approach on how to proceed in phasing in order to get some near-term improvements done while we're working on the long-term. Because you can't just cut off the left turns. You have to have some corresponding improvements that make the alternative routes viable at the same time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Todd. Kathleen Azevedo.
Good morning. So I happen to actually live at the Eckhart Road turnoff. That's my home. It's been my home. My family's owned this property for 80 years. So I feel as if what I've heard a lot about today is truck traffic. So we've already completed the no left turns for trucks through this whole corridor at this point, right? So I live just one exit away from Spence, and I hear the sirens and such and so forth, as they come. Looking at this, I feel like we're not truly we're not looking at the true problem. I don't think it's the trucks turning left because they haven't. We still continue to have accidents. Speed is a huge issue. And I know those of you who are on this call that have been with me in the meetings before, I sound like a broken record, but speed is a huge problem. So I saw on one of the slides, the vehicle going 72 or 78 miles an hour. Okay, it's a 65 mile an hour speed limit, which I've been told that we can't lower the speed limit in the interim to try to help mitigate some of the accidents. But a lot of times these are now cars, passenger cars, crossing over into the traffic, making a left-hand turn. So I feel like we're looking at this for ag truck traffic, but we're not looking at I didn't hear anything about just purely the volume of vehicles that are coming from the south at both times the the morning commute and the afternoon commute. I mean, getting on the freeway is, and I see people, I mean, we had a meeting a couple of months ago and I went down to Spence Road to make a left, which was the stupidest thing I could do because I should have just turned at mine. And there was a car that came out from Spence to cross into going south and sat in the middle of the freeway. And I'm looking at him and I go, you're the reason why we have accidents. It is not safe that you're coming out and sitting in the middle lane with me while there are cars behind me because you're short on time or whatever it is, the reason that you feel like you need to risk my life, your life, and the other people on the freeway. So I just want to see, what are your guys' thoughts about just purely the car traffic?
That's a good point. And I believe we're trying to catch up with that decision to put prohibitions on the left turns of the trucks. So it kind of plays into what we're saying is don't do something on 101 without looking at the ramifications. So you'll see in the staff report, there's also some improvements that we want to see for bike, and we want to see transit and quality of life for the residents there. So I wouldn't say we're going to put speed bumps, but or traffic calming, formal traffic calming, but we do have to look at the extra volume. So to your point, that is part of this assessment. And it's not just about truck traffic. So you're correct. This is not going to be just about truck traffic using the blue lines. Again, this is an overview, but that's the kind of input that we're going to get so that we can come back with decisions. And to your point, we don't want to induce traffic, because if we make it too nice, too attractive to use the Old Stage Road, we're just going to be inducing people to use that instead of 101. So it's going to be really important to implement solutions that the community is going to support. So I hope that addresses your question. Concern.
Yeah, I would just like to see the accidents. I would like to see the vehicle type accidents since we implemented the no truck left turn. Have we seen an increase, decrease, and what was the cause of those accidents in order to see, we've already, for the most of us ag companies, we've diverted our traffic already because, and obviously we haven't seen much impact or you haven't heard much impact from the businesses because we've already diverted it simply because you can't make the left-hand turn, right? And, truck drivers are not going to, most truck drivers aren't going to take that risk of getting a ticket and having their license jeopardized by making the left-hand turn. Now our long haul truckers, they are different. The long haul truckers, which are a lot of what I feel like you guys are seeing coming out of that Spreckles, is because they have the cooler there, that you see more long hauls coming out of there. Most of your truck traffic is coming from the fields into Salinas with the product, and what's coming out of Salinas is the finished product in a long haul truck, which probably isn't going to make a left-hand turn anyways, because they're heading out of town.
Okay, great. Kathleen?
Yes.
May I ask you, these are all great ideas and comments, and there's going to be the outreach to the public and stakeholders. So I know you will be involved, so we appreciate that. I do want to move to the hands that are raised from the board. We'll open this back up for the public to make additional comments or questions. So let's go back to the board questions for now. Mayor Kimberly Craig, you're next up.
Thank you. I just would also, Doug, if you could please just acknowledge, or as we enter into this phase of exploring Old Stage and 101, engage the local public safety agencies as well. If I recall correctly, there's only one sheriff's deputy that's assigned between San Juan Grade and Prunedale. And so, obviously with the redirect of traffic, San Juan, Old Stage Road would have one sheriff's deputy patrolling that. So, and obviously the turnoffs there throughout the city of Salinas, I respectfully request that the city of Salinas, Salinas Police Department also be engaged in traffic safety and those conversations, because those are generally less populated areas that don't always have the robust law enforcement presence in those areas. So with the redirecting traffic, I just want to make sure that we're taking a look at ensuring that there's traffic safety there.
Absolutely, and there was a lot in this presentation, but yes, we were working with enforcement because that's a critical component. So that will certainly be done within the city and on the county roads and 101.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Any other board members with questions at this time? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. So let's go back to the public. Any members of the public with questions or comments on this agenda item? Now would be your time. Norm Group, go for it.
Thank you and good morning. Norm Group for Farm Bureau Monterey, and I've been actively involved in participating with the highway south of Salinas Highway 101 safety for quite some time now, and we've been following this with considerable interest. And I'm going to echo a lot of the comments that were already stated, so I apologize if I'm repeating here, but I do want to emphasize again what was stated earlier. This is an issue of really speed and volume on Highway 101, not just truck traffic, but in general, the volume of traffic and the speed that it is moving at. And I question the capacity of these arterials that are in blue lines at this point, particularly the intersections at Potter and Spence off of Old Stage, and how we're going to manage additional traffic on those arterials. The conditions of those streets or roads are already pretty poor, as was noted earlier. And there needs to be some traffic calming out there also, because speeds are a big issue on Old Stage as well as some of the other arterials. I question too whether or not we really will see traffic going through Salinas to follow these blue lines. I think you're going to see more where the exit at airport is becoming more congested as they turn over the highway and reverse traffic on Highway 101 rather than taking this particular alternative route. So I think a lot of consideration needs to be given the fact that many of the truck drivers, as well as others coming into the community here, are not familiar with the arterials. So I think there's a lot to consider here, and I appreciate the opportunity that we're moving forward with some sort of short-term rather than waiting for a long-term solution. And I look forward to working and providing more comments and input on this particular proposal as it moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. Any other members of the public? Questions, comments? Now would be your time. Dirk, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Was that me, Dirk?
Yes, Dirk.
Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Dirk Giannini. I'm a grower here on the east side that farm many ranches on Alisal Road and Old Stage Road. And just wanted to echo, I think, Norm's concerns about on this short-term alternative route. The quality of Old Stage Road is horrendous. And I hope as we explore this option that there is some resources that can be done to enhance that, not only the width of the road, but also the quality of the repair and removal of the potholes. The edges of the county road are just degrading, eroding away on all the ditches and along that corridor. So I just want to, I think Norm said it well, and we need to really put some infrastructure and some resources into that short-term alternative route. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug, I think if you could stop sharing at this point, I think we'd be able to go back to seeing more of our participants a little easier. Any other members of the public wishing to make a comment or have a question? Last call. Okay, seeing, Dominique, I see your hand. Dursa?
Yeah, thank you. Dominic Durso with Assemblymember Revis's office. Just one quick question. In terms of the outreach you're looking to do over the summer, obviously outreach isn't always perfect when you're doing this, but how many points of contact, how many outreach events, whether they be virtual, sending out emails, whatever, how much feedback are you looking to get back? Because we've seen in other areas of our assembly district, there's always going to be those people who don't hear about the need to give feedback on this. So, I mean, how much feedback is really going to be considered a success, points of contact, whether it be, 1,000 people being involved, 2,000? What are you kind of really looking at as a successful outreach program?
Well, let me start by saying that our key point is going to be scheduling for July. So I think we can have over 100 people, probably participate in that. And it'll still be a virtual meeting. So we've had very good success on FORTAG recently for just the project in Delray Oaks. We had, I think, 150, close to 150 participants. We also have a web page. So the website's been set up. So, what is success? I think success is if we've put out the options for people and we have the Traffic Safety Alliance who are very good at getting the word out too. So working together with them and representatives and board members, we feel we should have a good net out there to get the message out. And I don't know if we can give a specific number of participants to say what's successful, but it's critical that we just listen to everybody and that we understand what the community needs are.
Okay, great. Thanks, Doug. Any other members of the public?
I'm sorry, Chair Smith, if I could just add to Doug's comment.
Go ahead, Todd.
As far as our outreach plans, we're going to start with the open house hosted by Supervisor Lopez that Doug mentioned, and work with the US 101 South of Salinas Traffic Safety Alliance to present to their full group. And then we'll be available with the full team, TAMC staff, the GHD consultant team, and the sheriff and the CHP as needed, to meet with any other group, whether the Farm Bureau or any other group would like a tailored individual presentation. We'll be available to do that. So we're really geared up to do as much outreach as needed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Todd. And of course, you know that we have our Caltrans representative that is here with us today, Scott Eads. So he's hearing it all.
And actually, Brandy Ryder from Caltrans is also with us, and she's the project manager for this project.
Okay, great. So we're going to close any public comment on this. I'm going to go back to board member Yuri Anderson, alternate. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Smith. I just wanted to point out that later in this agenda, we're going to be asked to consider a racial equity program for the agency. And so I think when you think about outreach as it relates to South of 101, you want to make sure you're looking at it from a racial equity lens as well. And how are you implementing that outreach program, being very strategic. So you have a website, you have some town halls, but I heard all kind of organizations mentioned through which to do this outreach, and you need to be a lot more intentional to reach individual residents if we're actually going to be looking to do racial equity work through TAMC.
Will do.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we'll close the public comment now and turn this back to the board, or I'm sorry, the staff, if there's any other closing comments or remarks we want to make before we move to the next item.
No, we're just remember that we're asking the board to authorize staff to conduct public outreach on the corridor and collect input. And I think the board members will be expecting a report back after this is done, maybe September timeframe, and we'll have more information for you.
The bar makes that motion.
Okay, I was just going to make a comment before that. Unfortunately, as we all sort of focus towards the finish of a project and started to talk about design, I think it's a natural tendency that we're all anxious to get to an improved area. And there's a lot of work to be done before we get there, and a lot of work to be done after the stakeholders have contributed. Then we get into the actual design. So we look forward to that. I heard that there was a motion. Who was that?
Labar.
Per seconds.
Michael. Okay, Kerr second. Thank you very much. Eloise, if you could do the roll for that motion, please.
Okay. District 1, alternate Gonzalez.
Supervisor Alejo is back on. Aye.
Okay, thank you. District 2, alternate Stratton.
Aye.
District 3, alternate Barba.
Aye.
District 4, alternate Anderson.
Yes.
District 5, Supervisor Adams.
Aye.
City of Carmel by the Sea.
Aye.
City of Delray Oaks.
Aye.
City of Gonzales. City of Greenfield.
Aye.
City of King City.
Aye.
City of Marina.
Aye.
City of Monterey.
Aye.
City of Pacific Grove.
Aye.
City of Salinas.
Aye.
City of Sand City. City of Sand City. City of Seaside.
Aye.
City of Soledad.
Aye.
Chair, the motion passes. We have two that didn't make the motion.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Next item is item number 6, Racial Equity Program. Executive Director, Deborah Hale.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's wonderful to see such a great turnout of interested residents. I think in terms of an interested group of folks, this project that we just heard about has done a great job of getting input. One of the things that TAMC staff has felt it was important to do was to take a look at how does our agency handle racial equity. You know, this is not just something that is certainly on point nationally, but it's also something that the state of California has put a new lens on it and has asked transportation agencies to take a closer look at. And so we started the process by having a 3-part training with the County of Monterey Civil Rights Office. It was an excellent opportunity to not only get some of the facts behind the issues of disinvestment and historic discrimination that then lead to lower outcomes in certain communities, and often race is the indicator or the factor that underlies all of that. We also had a chance to talk and brainstorm on how can we as an agency do a better job and help to improve outcomes so that the benefits of transportation improvements are shared more equitably across the county. We talked a lot about the notion of equity versus equality, and the notion that equity sometimes involves investing extra funding in order to raise up those who are lower than ourselves. My favorite drawing of this is with the dad, the teenager, and the little kid, and they're all standing on different size boxes to see over the fence to see the ball game, because the little kid needs a bigger box than the dad does. So we coalesced around 3 different areas that we thought the agency could focus on in terms of addressing racial equity. The first area was funding. The second area, which we've actually talked a lot about in the past, is hiring. And the third area is public outreach, which we have a lot of attention and thoughts about, but I would argue that we haven't really done a super great job in most places because it's harder to get communities involved when you're reaching out to individuals than when you're reaching out to organizations. So I'm just going to walk through the program as we proposed it. And we did present this to the executive committee and made some important changes to it. But I'd love to get your thoughts and hopefully your buy-in on where we end up. So we gave each one of these an equity statement and then action items. So under the funding section, the equity statement is to provide an equitable share of transportation investments to underserved, racially diverse communities to improve their health, safety, and quality of life. And where we want to start with this is to conduct a needs assessment. This is something that we've done in terms of transportation outcomes, but we haven't done it in terms of demographic characteristics. And so this is data that actually the Civil Rights Office has, or we have via the census, or we have via the community places survey. I'm sure I didn't quite get the name right on that. And so I'd like to do a countywide assessment that takes a look at race, income, languages spoken. I think that has to do with also English language proficiency, and access to active transportation and health outcomes. And then based on that information, we've got the GIS skills to develop a map that will show where are the areas where the need exists. Then how do we put this information to use? One of the ways we can do it is that there are state programs that provide extra credit for making investment in disadvantaged communities. But we don't always find that their definition of disadvantaged communities matches our area. We've had long conversations about this in the past, and some of the programs allow you to adopt a regional definition. And so what we would do would be to come back with a proposed regional definition based on the needs assessment. AMBAG has, in fact, done a regional definition, but this would allow us to drill down even further and get into more specifics. And the active transportation program allows us to adopt a regional definition, and I think that's an area there's been a lot of interest in having investments in our county improve. Then the second thing we can do is take a look at some of the funding that we control, our staff has taken a look at what's being done in other communities. It's called a community-based transportation plans that have participatory budgeting. And basically what you do is you have some community groups that you pull together and you give them a certain amount of money, and you give them the transportation information, and you get their input. Well, what do you really want? One of the ways where I saw this very well illustrated was a career-changing meeting that we had with AMBAG, where we had English speakers, Spanish speakers, and Triqui speakers. This was in Greenfield on the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And these local folks who we didn't even have a translator for, they actually had a community member helping us out. They wanted lighting at night. And this isn't something we think about regularly. And so, again, that's why you go out to the community, is because you find out what's important to people. So this participatory budgeting actually can be a part of our Safe Routes to School program, because we have flexibility on that funding. And I want to take a short break and let you know that we found out yesterday that we got from Caltrans the statewide planning grant to do the Salinas Valley Safe Routes to School program for the 4 Salinas Valley cities, South Salinas cities. So we're really pleased with that, because as Ariana just told me in the chat, we have funding for a participatory budgeting program in that grant. So we will actually be able to do this. So it's really exciting. Now, if this sounds familiar to some of you on the Peninsula, this is exactly the kind of thing that City of Monterey's Neighborhood Improvement Program does. And so we have a model out there in our own county. And so we think that really the key is to figure out the right amount of money and to involve, get the right representatives in the community. So those of you who represent South County cities will be working with you to implement this. If this is, well, we'll be doing it as part of our grant, but we'll also be looking to your input as to who to talk with. The next suggestion is that our next round of Safe Streets funding, this was funding that we had set aside as part of our flexible state money that we do every 2 years. We do a grant program, and that'll be coming up next spring. And so we could give extra credit, or we could, in fact, focus some of the funding on racially diverse areas. And that's something that you all can think about and make it a factor in there. And we'll be looking at that criteria separately. But we felt like that this would give us a way to make a more meaningful investment. Kind of related to that is the notion of making it a priority to designate funding for a transformational project to benefit a racially diverse community. So the participatory budgeting projects are generally smaller because you do them in a couple different places. But it would be most meaningful to do something then that was transformational. And again, that could come out of the Safe Streets funding, or it could come out of the RSTP flexible funding program that we expect to do in the spring. And then the last point we are in fact required to do, and that is including an equity discussion in the 25-year regional transportation plan. And so Madeline Jacobson's working on that. And what we would do is we would use this policy as well as your input to help guide what that statement says. The next area that we talked about was hiring. And in some ways, this is the most difficult area. So the equity statement is to hire to reflect the diversity of Monterey County community in order to increase TAMC's success as an agency. So the action items we put here are taking a look at just expanding our outreach in a number of different ways. And in some ways working with you all and the community to assure that we're reaching out to the different groups out there. We'd like to develop a mentorship program with some of the professional associations out there. American Public Works Association has an internship program. In the past, we've had interns. It's sometimes, we haven't had them during the pandemic because that's a really hard environment to do it in. And we're not planning to do it this summer because we're still integrating back in. But that's certainly a way to try to bring in people and encourage them to get involved in transportation. Presenting career information at college career days. We've done some of this in the past, but I think this is a really important way for us to stay connected. Evaluating our recruiting practices to assure outreach to ethnically diverse organizations and community groups. We would be taking a look at that. And then actively working with board members, local nonprofits. I'm thinking places like Building Healthy Communities. I'm thinking local community colleges like Hartnell College to advertise job openings to a diverse group of individuals. Well, and then I list also partner with community colleges and or Cal State Monterey Bay to hire local interns. We think hiring local is, to the extent we can do that, is a really good way to, invest in our community. And then we had an idea to try to bring information out to the profession, which we're always trying to do. Government is a great direction to go in, and transportation can be a profession. And so we'd like to conduct a transportation art contest with school children. And what I would like to mention is that we are so thrilled to already be moving forward on one of these goals, and that is to hire local. We have made a job offer and it has been accepted, and everything going well, you will meet this new person in August. Planner from Cal Poly Pomona. I'm going to get that right. So Todd's thrilled. Aaron Hernandez, and he is from San Ardo. And he is so enthusiastic and so energetic, was a leader in planning. Todd's really excited because he was big in American Planning Association, and he went to Cal Poly Pomona. And so we're thrilled we're going to be bringing him on staff in July. And really exciting to see. And then the last area we have here is in public outreach. The equity statement is design and implement public outreach and engagement that is broadly accessible and provides means for all to participate. So we feel like adoption of the transportation disadvantaged communities definition is also part of this item. We're going to coordinate with AMBAG, our Metropolitan Planning Organization, to make sure that the public outreach plan is broad enough. And we're going to work with you all to try to develop a list of public outreach champions within various ethnic groups, because let's face it, the elected officials, you all are out there in your community. You know who we need to touch base with. And that may not be the traditional organizations that we normally interact with or that come to us. So that goes to the second notion. And then our impression over the past 15, 16 months is that remote meetings have really improved our outreach. We've gotten people that don't have to drive to a meeting. We've talked a lot about the digital divide, and I know that increasing resources will be going to branch that, but there's also a transportation divide. And having to take transit to a meeting, more importantly, having to go to a meeting during working hours, having to go to a meeting that is taking place at night when you're having dinner with your family, or maybe your hours are non-standard. That's much more of a hardship than actually being able to link in. And so we think that the future isn't having, certainly community meetings, having them either remote or hybrid. As Doug noted, we had 125 people on our public meeting on the FORTAG. And I think that's because it's easier to be able to participate. And so we want to be able to continue that. So that's a summary, and I would be happy to take your comments, your thoughts, so that we can make this policy the best that we can. Thank you.
Okay, let's open this up to comments for staff and Debbie on this item. I see Mike LeBaire, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. Let me get rid of this hand. I thought the lists, the three sections we'll be focusing on, I thought all the items made sense and more importantly were achievable. So I think you did a really good job there. Funding on the pilot program, I really love that idea. I think that brings more engagement and gets resources really down to meet some really local needs. But with like the Bike and Ped Committee, they're made up of public members, right? Would they have the ability to either tap into that program? Because I've asked for some flexibility for micro grants at very local levels for needs that meet theirs criteria regarding Bike and Ped. And I think that's another way to hit that racial equity component when it comes to funding, to allow some modifications. So please consider that. The broader definition of disadvantaged communities, that's absolutely important. That was it. I thought that was very well done. And I'm looking forward to seeing TAMC implement these and achieve all those goals.
Okay, and we can definitely add microgrants to the list. It's been part of our Safe Routes to School program. And to be perfectly honest, we've had such success in getting planning monies that we haven't had a big chance to implement that, but bringing on a new planner should give us the ability to do that. So if the board wants, we can add that.
Right, thank you. Mayor Delgado.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Debbie, for introducing this concept. Diversity, equity, and inclusion regarding the hiring is great because you've got to hire diverse workforce to get diversity in your workforce. But keeping them sometimes goes against our Eurocentric culture, where our culture in our organizations, whether it be a city hall or a government workplace or a private workplace, the culture is very Caucasian, very American, and sometimes isn't as friendly to non-traditional employees as it is to the culture that we're used to when we grew up in this country. And so regarding the needs assessment, I'm wondering if you have already, or if you could interview immigrants on staff now and find out, is the work setting, are the walls, are the decorations, the music, the cubicles, does that encourage their retention, or is it something that they're forced to adjust to, on a regular basis, so that we may get but not retain a minority workforce because we're not inclusive in our day-to-day ongoing culture at the office. So I guess that's my question is, part of the needs assessment, has it already included, or could it include optional interviews not required for a diverse workforce that we have now, representatives who we have now, to find out how we're doing within the TAMC culture to retain them, and would they be comfortable recommending to other minorities to work for TAMC, and what do we need to make it more attractive to retain, not just to hire and attract initially?
Sure, I think that's an excellent idea, and I guess I would turn to my experts at the Civil Rights Office to talk about that. We talked about this in our workshops a little bit, and sometimes the pressure on those who are, representing ethnic minorities to sort of speak for everyone, and that one has to be sensitive to that. And so I want to approach it carefully so that, we're not overly burdening people. In a general sense, in this year in particular, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out, what makes a good working environment for people. And I would hope that our more flexible work from home policy has really helped in that regard, because, you've got people with kids, and you've got, people with differential levels of internet, and we've tried to raise the height of the equipment allowance and that kind of a thing. So I appreciate that comment, and we'll take that to heart.
Thank you. Mayor Kerr, you're next up.
Good morning. Thank you. I just want to echo that we have amazing resources with Hartnell students. I work with them with my other hat, and wonderful young people that would love to be able to work in their communities. So that's all I wanted to say. We have a source in a pipeline, and perhaps if we work with Hartnell on inspiring students to even consider this as a career option, I think that would be really valuable. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Alejo.
Yeah, I also want to thank Debbie for bringing this forward. This is, I think, one of those legacy projects and leadership incorporating this into how policies and decisions and the outreach gets made by this agency from here and moving forward. This is not anything new. Certainly, the County of Monterey incorporated this several years ago, had different cohorts of staff trained through the governing for racial equity, as did the city of Salinas. And I believe there may be other jurisdictions in Monterey County moving to do the same. So I really want to thank TAMC for seeing the importance of incorporating this and making sure that we're reaching all segments of Monterey County through decisions, funding, and outreach. So I just wanted to express that support very strongly. And certainly, if I could, if we're making a motion to support the program that Debbie outlined, I'd like to make that motion. Thank you.
Second, Craig.
Okay, before we get to that, let's continue with board comments. Councilmember Podori.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ms. Hale, for bringing this proactively forward to us. I actually had 3 points in here. One is this appears, or maybe I'm off, but is this going to provide us a benchmark for what DEI practices are within the organization? And if it's not providing a benchmark, can we establish a benchmark with this initiative? That will help us evaluate things in the future too. So that's point one. And then the second one was the agenda item specifically called out racial equity initiatives and how we're integrating them. I wanted to know how does the scope involve people with disabilities too, or not?
We specifically focused on, excuse me, the issue of racial equity because that was pointed out in our training as the prime determinant of lower economic outcomes. We have looked at disability in some of our transit related activities. It's kind of been integrated in our policies in other ways. And so we kind of felt like that racial equity was something that needed individual attention, and that's why we pulled it out.
Okay.
Yeah, and with regards to the benchmarking, yes, and I think that's worthwhile. One has to be really careful about benchmarking, but I think that there can be ways that we do that, and so we could actually come back with that, maybe on a consent agenda.
Okay. And my final point was, as we look to actually bring in racial equity initiatives across the board, we need to think more broadly in terms of procurement. My suggestion is if there's a procurement need within the organization or otherwise, that we incorporate some facets of what we're doing with who we're procuring from. For example, a supplier could be more socially responsible than anybody else. And that could be one of the objectives of actually selecting that supplier over anybody else. So just a suggestion, but just thinking out more broadly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Craig.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. I wanted to echo Supervisor Alejo's comments. I think this is a phenomenal opportunity for growth within our organization here at TAMC. I do want to just acknowledge, I do think the funding element, I know in the staff report, you guys have talked about those 3 different areas, the funding, public outreach, and hiring. I do think you guys do a good job in terms of being equitable with the funding. I mean, we've done a tremendous amount of work in the ALISAL and certainly in areas in the city, at least, that I think have benefited our city defined disadvantaged areas of the city. There's always room for growth. And I certainly recognize when you're talking about a countywide project that South County probably plays into that. And I would even imagine probably some areas of Carmel Valley or even Big Sur for that matter. I know that the traditional or stereotypical response to some of those areas is that they aren't disadvantaged communities, but I would argue that there are some very, very just underutilized areas in the unincorporated areas of the county that I think could use that assistance. So I would note public outreach will be critical in order to be successful for this, and certainly hiring as well. I mean, I think that's why this board opted to do a nationwide search for the next executive director or general manager. I do think that there's an opportunity there to diversify the staff, and that's not a hit in any way, shape, or form on that one particular position. But I do think that TAMC should really take an opportunity to have a staff that is reflective of the community. So with that, I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Yuri Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. I also just wanted to thank the staff for bringing this forward. It's really nice to see participation in a training opportunity and then really thoughtful engagement and coming back with actionable steps that you can take to implement against a racial equity plan. So thank you. And then I also I'm here representing District 4 today, but I also wouldn't be doing my job as chair of the Monterey Peninsula College Community District Board if I didn't mention that we have another community college in our area that is a Hispanic serving institution. Over 45% of our students are people of color. And so we're very actively working to try and see if we can do a grow your own in the planning area, recognizing that we do have need for planners. So just don't forget about NPC, guys.
And thank you, Board Member Anderson, for mentioning that. We did have a meeting that the County Planning Department had arranged and talked with number of different folks at MPC about a grow your own program in planning, which is super exciting for us planners. That it would be fantastic. So thank you for mentioning that.
And thanks for calling that out. Yuri is a graduate of Monterey Peninsula Junior College, as it used to be called. It served me well. Next up is Scott Eads.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that Caltrans applauds this effort and is very supportive. I just wanted to say a couple things about what Caltrans is doing. We've established Caltrans Office of Race and Equity. We've crafted a race and equity action plan. And then even in District 5, which is our local district here where I work, we've established an equity task force, which is really, thinking about ways that we can incorporate equity into the things that we're doing in our offices and with the dollars that we control. And then we've also added books on equity and related topics into our Caltrans library, which is largely available for Caltrans staff. We've created a website. And then I would say importantly, and probably of direct importance to TAMC, is we've incorporated significant goal and strategy and action language into our strategic management plan, which was just released. And part of what we're doing there is really thinking about or rethinking how we are prioritizing projects and funding around equity. And so that's happening concurrently. We're also working on a new equity indicator, which is something that's happening internally to help us better differentiate where these communities and populations are that we need to be rethinking how we engage and how we prioritize projects. So thank you.
Very much.
Scott, I hope you can share that with me, and I'll distribute it to the staff.
Will do.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity there to look to what Caltrans is doing also, because certainly they're going to be looking at the criteria that our own agency has that we're able to check off when we're talking about reviews, grants, funding, and a variety of sources. So great opportunity. Deborah, did not look like this was looking for a board vote of any kind. You were saying review and comment. Do you see this any otherwise? Do you need to, would you like to have a board approval for this agenda item?
Well, I know we had a motion in a second, and you all could adopt it now, or I could bring it back in August with some taking into account some of the comments that were made, and then put it down for approval on consent.
Yeah, and I think that with the comments, this is a draft and it's a start, a good start. But I think before we rush to a vote, I think we should give staff an opportunity to see what Caltrans is doing, take the comments you've heard today, and allow this item to come back, and we would ask for a vote at that time once we have filled in a little bit more detail on the proposal of actually having a racial equity program that's very robust and that we can all stand behind. So I'd like to use the prerogative and hold off and not take a motion today or for a vote, but let's let this draft grow and get to us as a return agenda item with more details.
And Mr. Chair, I can withdraw my motion. I just wanted to make sure that the full board gives kind of the blessing and that it's public, that the full board supports the program that Debbie's putting forward. So we could take that up in August, no problem.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you very much. I think I would say it's by consensus that this is a move ahead. And Debbie, if you need anything else from us, you'll certainly reach out to the members of the board. But I think you've heard some great comments today.
Thank you very much.
Great. So let's move on to item 7. Let's receive reports from our transportation providers. Caltrans, Scott, you're next up. Oh, and I'm sorry, I missed going to the public. On that last item, let me stop here and ask, was there any members of the public that wanted to ask a question or make a comment on item 6, racial equity program? My apologies. Any members of the public? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 7.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I just have a couple things I wanted to announce. First is a little bit of a somber note, and that is new news from FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, that work zone fatalities are the highest they have been since 2006. And this is based on 2019 data. During 2019, 842 people died in highway-related work zone crashes compared to 757 the year before. This is an 11.2% increase, and it's the largest in highway work zone fatalities since 2006. These crashes most often occur when drivers are not paying attention or distracted, looking at their phones, other things. And so that's, key to what we're seeing there. And just also on a related note, I just want to highlight that what we're seeing as California reopens is that volumes are picking up. People are traveling more at the beginning of summer. And we also have a lot of projects under construction, not only at Caltrans, but in our local jurisdictions that are also getting out there and taking advantage of the dollars that are available to complete projects. And the summer months are an important time to do that. So please, this is an appeal to anybody listening. Please be thoughtful and aware when you're driving through work zones. Please slow down. These are Caltrans employees and contractors and local jurisdiction staff that live in our communities, and they just want to get home to their families. And so we all have a role in that in terms of driving, being aware and driving through these work zones slowly and really paying attention to the signs and the folks that are working out there. The other item that I wanted to highlight is, and Debbie touched on this, I'm glad she did, is the Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant Awards were released this week. There were 13 awards submitted within District 5 and 5 received approvals, 5 grants, and they were all pretty substantial in terms of scope and dollar amount. So a few that, and actually all of them for the most part were awarded in the northern part of the district. So Debbie had mentioned the Salinas Safe Routes to School plan. That was $664,000 effort, and that was one of the ones selected. Also, dollars went to $550,000 were awarded to AMBAG for an integrated land use model and development monitoring framework tool, which is basically the AMBAG regional travel forecasting model and some tools associated with that. So that's going to benefit TAMC in the region as well. And then there were a couple in Santa Cruz, one for a VMT mitigation program, another for to Santa Cruz Metropolitan Transit District for an intercity transit speed and reliability study. And then there was another one that was awarded to SB-CAG, but it was part of the Central Coast Coalition and coordinated efforts between all of the RTPAs and MPOs within District 5, and that is for a Central Coast zero emission vehicle strategy. So another important effort that we're thinking ahead about how we can make sure and have transit facilities and or charging facilities and other things that are needed to support a transition to zero emission vehicles. That is all I have today. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Seeing no questions from board members, let's move to Bill Sabo, Monterey Peninsula Airport.
Thank you, Ed. We appreciate, as always, the opportunity to talk about this, the airport as a transportation provider. We're doing gangbusters at the airport due to the COVID vaccination thing. We're actually now up to 15,500 employments in May, and that's bringing us near to where we were pre-pandemic. And the important thing that I really wanted to stress is that we've learned that about 45% our local employments, local citizens from the region, and are coming from Salinas and the Salinas Valley. We are a local transportation provider for the residents of our region. And it's been my ambition to encourage more use of the airport by our citizens. And I want to dispel the myth that we only exist to serve the tourism community. We are here for the local citizens, and apparently the message is getting out, and more people from Salinas and South County are using the airport, and we're very pleased about that. And contributing to our high employment rate is we have a very low cancellation rate. We're down to less than 1% of our flights are being canceled, which is phenomenal compared for airports. Our new Seattle flight is doing gangbusters business. The flights are leaving full to Seattle, and that was a primary objective of a lot of citizens of our region, to be able to do a nonstop to Seattle, and it's working out very well. Things I wanted to announce is that we are now establishing a pre-check program in coordination with TSA. And this will allow you to go through TSA without taking your shoes off, without taking your belt off, and without a lot of the commotion that you encounter going through TSA. There is an application process application you have to fill out, and then there is going to be an enrollment at the airport from July 19th and July 23rd from 9 to 5, and I have some brochures, and I'll try to figure out a way to distribute that via Eloise if that's possible, because it really speeds up your movement through the airport if you're a little bit more frequent flyer. We still have COVID testing going on at the airport, provided by the Hospitality Association. And that's important to you if you're traveling international, because in many of the European and Asian nations, they're still requiring proof that you have been tested prior to your departure. So that's going to be available. That's a new program, and it's going to be available at our Monterey Airport. We now have 11 nonstop destinations departing mostly daily, and that's a substantial growth in our service to the community and to our hospitality and tourism industry. We have received recently a $3.5 million grant from the Transportation Department regarding airport rescue. And I love the name of it, but it's a very well needed thing, because it supports our operations and offsets some of the concession grants, rental offsets that we gave to our concessionaires during the pandemic. So that's going to be very beneficial to us as an airport. And finally, we at the board started discussions on how we can be a resource to the county and the region regarding urban air mobility. And that's the electric aircraft that Joby and others are providing. And that's going to become an issue for many of you in your areas, in your cities and in the area. How do you access that? How do you take advantage of it? What do you need in your area in order to have these small aircraft land in your areas? And so we're starting to look at being a resource to the county for that. So thank you very much, Ed. Appreciate the opportunity.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Good to see you. Monterey Salinas Transit, Lisa Feinheimer.
Yes. Yes, thank you on behalf of MST.
Oh, pardon me, Mr. Chair. I believe you have a hand raised for Mr. Sabo.
I'm sorry. Let's go back to the airport conversation. Mr. Pedori.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make a remark. Just a couple of days ago, I actually saw a video coming in. There was a man that was flying a drone in Times Square. And as we talk about Joby Aviation, cargo drones are really not too far away. So something to think about for all of us. Thank you.
So your Amazon delivery can get even quicker.
I'm thrilled. Somebody made a comment.
Bill, you've got one more. Don't go away. Mayor Delgado.
Yeah, recently I had a fantastic flight experience through Monterey to Seattle and back, and the fares were incredibly low and the service fantastic. You know, Monterey Peninsula Airport is the favorite airport of mine to go through. It's so small and so easy and so great. And, you know, using that service as a customer reminds me of the hard work that Bill Sabo has done for decades and others to provide us this community asset of our airport, which is just fantastic. And it's just a pleasure to fly out of Monterey, the convenience, everything involved. We're very fortunate to have what Bill and others have provided us. So thank you, Bill, to everybody on your team.
Thank you. I'll pass that on to our staff and our board. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie, I see your hand is raised.
I couldn't resist the chance to just say that, Bill, I'm thrilled to be flying out of Monterey. It'll be my first flight in over a year to go to Portland. So I'm checking out that flight. And I'm curious, you mentioned the TSA pre-program. If one is already signed up for TSA pre, then is that going to work for the airport? And if so, as of what date?
If you're already signed up for TSA pre-check, I think you're covered on that, but I'll double check and make sure that that question gets answered, and because it's a tremendous advantage, and I'll get back to you directly on that.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, Lisa, you're on.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. A few things to announce today. Number one, this last week on the 14th, the MST board made a significant decision to move forward with the SURF project, partly funded by Measure X program through TAMC. So approving the environmental document and the project allows us to move forward with the final design phases and everything associated with it. So we'll come back to your board and give you updates as we move forward. So that was a significant vote for us. We are currently in the process of conducting what's called a comprehensive operational analysis. And that's basically, if we were to wipe the slate clean on our transit system, what would our services look like? So our committee last week directed staff to focus more on ridership demand versus covering all places, doing all things for all people, recognizing that by covering all places for all people, then we miss out on providing more meaningful transit services to our community. So we're going to shift that demand versus coverage more to the demand side. We'll be focusing more on equity versus equality, and that meaning we are looking at where we best serve those communities that need it most in terms of equity, those in low income status, those in minority status, those who have one or no car available to them. So we'll be focusing some energies on providing equity in transit, as well as shifting some of our resources to the untapped demand of the Salinas and Salinas Valley area versus the Seaside Monterey area. That is to say that the Measure Q programs that we operate are largely off the table. The partnerships that we participate in are largely off the table. We're really focusing in on our general fund programs where we can make a difference. So we've had a lot of participation these last few days. It's been pretty intense from your cities and county staff in terms of what the new system will look like. We'll have a draft plan in August and some community meetings to present to folks, you know, did we get this right? So more to come on it, but it's been a really good effort to take a look at our system as a whole, and we haven't done that in a long, long time. And then finally, I want to let you all know that we have a welcome back event scheduled for this coming Tuesday at the Monterey Conference Center. And we will be making some remarks about recovery and how MST contributes to our community recovery and what we're doing. We will be introducing one of our latest electric buses that we just received not a couple weeks ago, as well as reintroducing, and the chair will like this, the trolley service to Monterey starting July 3rd and ending on September 6th. So summertime trolley service is back daily from 10 to 6. And with no restrictions on capacity, it'll be really great, but we still have to have people keep their masks on due to federal mandate, not state mandate. So those are my remarks, and I'll be happy to answer questions if you have them.
That's great. Thank you. That will certainly help people with congestion getting to Cannery Row and back downtown. So look forward to that service starting back again. Okay, and next up would be, but I don't see Richard Stedman from Monterey Bay Air Resources. Eloise, I don't see him there on the list. And Richard, if you're there, speak up. Okay, so let's move on to next item, reports on meetings attended by board members at Transportation Agency expense. Any board members need to report? Mike Labar.
I just want to report on June 18th, I attended a CalCog meeting as your representative. And at that meeting, Fred Strong from the San Luis Obispo Council of Governments was elected as the president for this next term. Fred has a strong tie in with the transportation industry as a whole. I know Christina has worked with him, a huge rail supporter. So that was great to hear. Someone from our region is the chair for the CalCog this year. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, that's great news. Fred's a steady. Next up, Executive Director report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to ask Tracy Burke Vasquez to share some information on the screen if she can. So I've got 4 things that I need to cover here today. The first one I think I'll do while Tracy's getting ready to do that. And maybe Mike, you can make sure she's host. Oh, there we go. Okay. I want to talk about TAMC becoming a blue zone workplace. And then second of all, there we go. All right. Second of all, I'm going to talk about the board survey results. And then I will talk about the recruitment update. All right, so TAMC, as I think I announced at a prior meeting, became officially a Blue Zones workplace. Tracy, in fact, designed this logo, which I think is just fantastic because it shows movement and integrates with our TAMC logo. For those of you that aren't as familiar with it, the Blue Zones project is sponsored by Salinas Valley Memorial Healthcare System, Taylor Farms, and Montage Health. And we are now one of 16 workplaces in the county that are officially designated Blue Zones. We had to go through a whole list of activities that we agreed to support. And the notion is to coordinate with these 9 principles to move naturally. So we have our TAMC walk, which as soon as folks get back into the office, we'll be walking, but I know Todd does a lot of walking check-ins too. To have a purpose for yourself, which all of you who are elected officials, and I think all of us that are doing good for the community can say we have a purpose. Have a stress relieving strategy. So we have a couch in Todd's office since he's not in his office all the time these days. That's our wind down room, but we're probably going to repurpose our storage room as a wind down room when people come back to the office a little more. The 80% rule, to eat mindfully and stop when you're 80% full. Put more fruits and vegetables on your plate with the plant slant. Wine at 5, which is more of the social benefits, but also I think there's beneficial things in wine. So that's our support, the Salinas Valley wine industry. Belong to a faith-based community that's a little less work-oriented. Family first, allowing flexible principles in order to support people's work-life balance, and having a right tribe, having practices amongst ourselves that help to foster community. And one of those we've done during the Zoom era has been, we have at our staff meetings, we have the photos of the week. And so we get to see what is making people happy. A lot of different activities on that. So those are the 9 principles. There we are. There's our Blue Zone coordinator, Teresa Wright, who went through the whole checklist and coordinated with Blue Zones Monterey County. And there I am putting the sticker on the door. Here we are accepting the plaque from the new Salinas coordinator for the Blue Zones, Maribel. And the last picture is our banner, which we get to have at the TAMC offices for 2 weeks to brag about being a Blue Zones project. So the next thing I have is wanted to share with you just an overview of the COVID-19 meeting transition survey results. So we are pleased to have had 25 respondents to the survey, of which half were regular board members. So we got 12 out of 17. But we had a good number of alternate board members as well. We had 6 alternate board members. And we also had 6 ex officios, which could be all of our ex officios. So thank you all for responding. Out of those, 22 of them have been vaccinated. 2 of them have not been vaccinated. And then 1 was a decline to state. Everybody that had been vaccinated is done. They've already passed the 2 weeks. So given all of this, how would you like to attend TAMC board meetings? Well, there's a strong plurality of folks that want to attend board meetings in person, but there's also some people that want to attend remotely. And then there's those of us that were, well, it depends. So what is, how would you prefer to attend TAMC committee meetings? A strong preference for going ahead and having remote committee meetings, although certainly 30% would be willing to come in person, and then some more people will. It depends. So what does it depend on? Does it depend on vaccination statement, vaccination status? For just under 70%, it does. And you can't read what this says here, so I will translate it. I would prefer not to attend in person unless all participants are vaccinated or have proof of a negative COVID test. The testing is a little tricky to do. I prefer not to attend in person until we have a herd immunity in the county. So this definitely affects then, you know, who would be coming, let's say, to TAMC board meetings. What is the other depends? Let's see what the next survey question is. What protective measures would you like us to take? Basically, the answer is all of them. We also got, you know, checking for vaccinations, possible quick PCR tests. I'm not sure that those would be practical, but those were 2 additional suggestions. But almost everybody wanted us to have spacing. Some people were okay with food, some people weren't, but, you know, still a plurality. Sanitized spaces, individual microphones, limited audience, and people wearing masks. Number 1, people wearing masks. All right. Are there any specific issues? I'm just going to read some of the key ones. Don't have too small of a room. Would prefer remote or hybrid. Would prefer if everybody's vaccinated. Mask wearing. Number 1 comment we got was mask wearing. Okay, so what's my recommendation? My recommendation is that we continue as we proposed with a hybrid board meeting. I don't know how many of you have been doing hybrid board meetings. I've done a hybrid Rotary meeting, and I'm going to be doing a hybrid meeting with a JAM board. The hybrid meetings, we're going to have to practice on that at a staff level to make sure that both the people that are remote and the people that are in person have a strong feeling of participating, because it can be easy to forget, as some people say, the little people on the Zoom. And we want everyone to feel like they have a strong ability to participate. Until we decide otherwise, I think we'll stay with remote committees based on the input. But as noted, we're going to implement all of the all of the different features. There, as you note, there are people that prefer others to be vaccinated. So I presume that depends, because as we know from the survey, everybody isn't vaccinated, although certainly the vast majority are. And based on the governor's order being extended to September 30th, we will revisit this after September 30th. Obviously, if there are questions on this or comments, I'd be happy to take those. The last two things I want to mention is that Diane Item from RAPS asked me to make an announcement that the Executive Director recruitment closes on July 2nd, that the panel, the selection committee interviews will be on July 20th. The board member interviews will be July 28th at the Air District. And we are working to try to make that hybrid, but we are going to have to see how their system goes. And we are also hoping to have the interviewees there in person. And then Diane sent out an email to everybody to get your input on the interviews. And so if you could respond to that, if you haven't already talked to her in person, that would be great. The final thing I want to say is we have no committee meetings in July. And so we do have our special board meeting on the 28th at our normal time, 9 o'clock. Please block out 9 to noon at the Air District. And then our August meeting will be at the Air District. All right, and those are my announcements.
Okay, there may be some questions of the executive director, especially on the survey. So let's turn to the board for that. Supervisor Alejo.
I just wanted to thank Debbie for doing that survey, and I'm glad that we're able to continue on a hybrid basis. And it's only for a short amount of time, as the governor's executive order ends at the end of September. So we're really talking about the next 3 months. But I did want to just you know, as we are transitioning to, always just urge caution. We've been monitoring what other government agencies have done, and there was a report out of Florida just a couple of days ago where they had an outbreak already, and 2 of their government employees passed away that were not vaccinated, and those that were vaccinated were unimpacted. But then most recently, the added reports of the Delta variant that is quickly spreading, and the question whether that would cause another outbreak or in the fall. So we're monitoring that as well. So I want all of us to just always proceed with caution out of the safety of our board members and our staff and our public as we move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if we could do staff extra email announcement, location, time for our next board meeting, I think that'll be handy to make sure all the board members remember as we come back together at the Air Board location. And those that can join us in person are welcome, and those that choose to continue to do the meeting on Zoom. So I imagine there'll be some practice on the meeting and the location to make sure we have everything dialed in. The City of Monterey had its first meeting that was hybrid about a week ago, and I participated on Zoom. And of course, as all the meetings are, there's always some kind of a technology snag, but quickly resolved. But we had a pretty successful hybrid meeting with members of the public there, as well as members of the council on Zoom from afar, and then some members in the chambers on hybrid. So it worked out well. So I think after the first meeting, we'll get the bugs out and we'll move on, and should work pretty smooth and seamlessly. All right. Next up is announcements or comments from transportation agency members or matters they wish to see on a future meeting. Now's the time. Anything you would like to see in a future meeting? Board members?
This is Angela, City of Greenfield. I don't have anything that I wanted to see for the future meetings. I just wanted to announce that I will be resigning my board seat, and Council member Bob White will be replacing me. So I know next, I believe the next agenda and the next council meeting will be doing that whole process through the city. So he may be starting for the special meeting. I'm not sure yet, or but definitely by August, he'll be in my seat for TAMC. So I just wanted to announce that.
Thank you, Angela. And we're sorry to see you go, but we know that your city will still be represented. But we thank you for your contribution this last, I think it's been 2 years, hasn't it? Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Sorry to see you go. Okay, any other board members with comments, questions, or future items you'd like to see on the agenda? Okay, hearing none, this meeting will be adjourned. Thank you all.